On the surface of the lake, the water immediately dropped by a foot. This scene appeared quite ordinary, with nothing particularly strange about it. If using divine abilities, not to mention a foot of water, even turning the entire lake into vapor would be incredibly simple. Needless to say, even an elder like this one, and certainly Wang Lin, would have dozens of methods to perform a strike far more formidable than this one, seemingly harmless. Quite ordinary, isn't it? The elder turned to Wang Lin, a meaningful smile on his face. Wang Lin's eyes flashed as he stared at the lake's surface. The scene of the elder's palm descending just now appeared in his mind. After focusing, he showed a contemplative expression in his eyes. Seeing this, the elder's smile deepened, and he refrained from interrupting. He wanted to see if Wang Lin's comprehension could reveal any clues about this technique. When I learned this technique from the ancestor, I couldn't understand its deeper meaning either. Even that astonishingly talented fourth-generation vermilion bird couldn't grasp it and could only explore its edges. Only after the ancestor explained it to him did he suddenly realize its true essence. Let's see how the sixth-generation brat fares. But I don't think his talent can compare to the fourth-generation vermilion bird. His cultivation seems to be largely due to fate, or perhaps related to the disciple the fourth-generation vermilion bird once spoke of. Otherwise, it would be impossible for someone with just over 2,000 years of cultivation to even touch the edge of illusory flame, a feat that even the ancestor, at this age, could not accomplish. The elder suddenly remembered Wang Lin's extraordinary 5 fundamental origins, and his thoughts came to a halt. Perhaps, maybe this little brat can figure it out? The elder's gaze became slightly troubled as he looked at Wang Lin. Wang Lin furrowed his brow, the scene of the elder's strike flashing repeatedly in his mind. The strike appeared utterly ordinary, simply shaking the lake's surface, causing droplets of water to rise, which then collided and, after numerous collisions, completely shattered into mist. However, judging by the elder's words and demeanor, this technique clearly contains some powerful principle. Lost in thought, Wang Lin approached the lake, crouched down, and raised his right hand. Gently, he pressed his hand against the surface. He didn't use any divine abilities, merely placing his hand as an ordinary person would. As his hand descended toward the water's surface, Wang Lin distinctly felt a subtle rebound force emanate from the lake. This force was weak, almost imperceptible, and this was exactly as it should be. Although the water's surface was soft, it could lift floating leaves. Naturally, his hand encountered a slight resistance. Normally, Wang Lin wouldn't have paid attention to this, nor would he have pondered why it happened. But now, the instant this rebound force appeared, Wang Lin's eyes suddenly tightened. The ripples on the water's surface spread out in concentric circles, just like Wang Lin's thoughts at that moment, waves upon waves, striking his heartstrings. He was different from others. Wang Lin was an ancient god. For the ancient god tribe, aside from divine abilities, the greatest strength lay in their physical power. A single punch could split the sky and destroy a cultivation star. This kind of terrifying strength created the unimaginable power of the ancient gods. Because of this, Wang Lin's mastery over force was far different from those cultivators who relied solely on magical techniques or divine abilities. When I was young, I once read a description of dripping water wearing through stone. The water seems so soft, but in reality, it is incredibly hard. A drop of water falling on a stone will shatter into countless droplets, but the instant it touches the stone, a rebound force will arise. Although this force is weak, the constant falling of water over years, the vibration over time, is enough to penetrate the stone. Not to mention a stone. If an ancient god lay there for millennia, even their body, impervious to all divine arts, would eventually be pierced by these drops of water. Wang Lin's eyes brightened with realization as he stood up and looked at the elder. The elder's expression suddenly became serious, a hint of shock flashing in his eyes. He had never expected that Wang Lin could, based on his own insight, faintly touch the edge of the secret technique. This child's talent may not compare to the fourth-generation vermilion bird. It's like the difference between heaven and earth, but his understanding of the world is so astonishing that he has managed to compensate for his lack of innate talent. He's reached the level of comprehension the fourth-generation vermilion bird achieved back then. No wonder he possesses those abnormal 5 fundamental origins. This might not be mere coincidence. The elder gasped, his gaze towards Wang Lin filled with admiration. He nodded, about to explain. In his view, Wang Lin's ability to reach this point was already an extraordinary achievement. It was unlikely that he could see any deeper. However, before the elder could speak, Wang Lin's eyes suddenly gleamed, and he slowly said, "This is just the beginning." The elder was stunned. Water contains both softness and strength. After accumulating into a lake, the surface naturally holds a rebound force. The greater the force I apply with my palm, the greater the rebound force. A punch thrown at the water, in that instant, the shock force rebounding from the surface is no weaker than the punch I just threw. In this way, it was as if two forces crossed each other in an instant, creating a terrifying force of collapse. That was why, when the elder's palm struck just now, countless tiny water droplets collided millions, even tens of millions of times in an instant, causing the layer of lake water to completely disintegrate. This disintegration was a change of state, transforming from water into vapor that formed clouds and mist. Though it seemed simple, it actually contained a force of unimaginable power. The force to alter the essence of life. The more Wang Lin spoke, the brighter his eyes became, his mind clearing up, thoughts flooding in. The image of the elder's palm striking the lake echoed in his mind, repeating hundreds or even thousands of times. It should be like this. The elder's palm just now contained this principle. One punch splitting the heavens, it can collapse an entire cultivation star. Although there's a rebound, the instant that force is transmitted, the cultivation star can no longer withstand the collapse. The force to destroy a cultivation star, apart from the user's own strength, also relies on this rebound. But water is different. Water's resilience is like the extremes of heaven and earth. Especially when accumulated to a certain level, forming lakes and seas, its capacity for tolerance is astonishing. The same punch, when struck upon the sea, would have a rebound force strong enough to cause one's collapse. The old vermilion bird stared at Wang Lin, his gaze sharpening, and the fear that had been evident in his eyes after Wang Lin displayed the 5 origins faded, only to gradually return with a more intense glow. This insight into heaven and earth, I have never seen such a thing in another person's eyes in my entire life. This kind of comprehension is infinitely stronger than any natural talent. His 5 origins are definitely not luck. The old vermilion bird took a deep breath, his gaze turning even more peculiar as he looked at Wang Lin. At this moment, he still didn't know that, should Wang Lin learn the ancient soul seal, there was a faint possibility he could merge and comprehend the pinnacle of sealing techniques, reaching the void realm, which might even give birth to his 6th origin. The void origin. Of course, the possibility was small, but it existed. Elder, your palm strike just now is teaching me how to use this rebound force, to strike with a punch and kill the enemy with the rebound, greatly increasing its power. It can even change the material form. While it may not be considered a divine art, it's a method beyond anything that could be described as an ordinary technique. Elder, am I correct? Wang Lin's eyes gleamed, joy flashing in them. This kind of power, though perhaps not very effective for others, since cultivators don't usually fight hand-to-hand, was invaluable to Wang Lin, who was an ancient god. For him, this was equivalent to any divine ability. In Wang Lin's ancient god memories, there had been no technique for utilizing this kind of power. The lessons from the old vermilion bird were monumental for him. Especially when recalling his battle with Tuosin, it was clear that Tuosin far surpassed him in this regard. Back then, Wang Lin was like a child compared to Tuosin in terms of power. To say he only had the brute strength of an ancient god was no exaggeration. The old vermilion bird swallowed, a satisfied look slowly forming on his face. After living for so long, it was easy for him to put on a mysterious expression. He nodded, his eyes filled with approval, and spoke slowly. Not bad. What you've said is indeed the basic principle, exactly what I wanted to teach you. Though the old vermilion bird said this, he was cautious inwardly, thinking to himself, damn it, I can't let this boy discover any flaws. If he realizes that even I never comprehended this fully back then, my elder face would be completely lost. I should have taught him the White Tiger or Azure Dragon Clan secret arts. Those things aren't for human training. With this boy's insight, he should study those instead. The old vermilion bird quickly cleared his throat and changed the subject, his eyes narrowing as he snapped. All right, you've learned the secret art. Now, come with me to the trial. Once it's finished, we'll go take down Si Mozhe and establish our prestige. With a wave of his sleeve, he immediately swept Wang Lin up, transforming into a blaze of illusory fire, heading toward the northwest. Inside the illusory fire, Wang Lin took a careful look around, secretly startled. So this is ethereal flame? It doesn't release any high temperature, yet it gives the impression that even my soul might be burned. With the old vermilion bird's cultivation, it didn't take long to carry Wang Lin to the northwest, arriving at the vast competition arena. At this moment, two cultivators were fiercely battling for the position of elder. The arena was surrounded by tens of thousands of cultivators, all focused intently on the battle. In midair, there were several spots no cultivators dared to approach. One of those spots was where Si Mozhe and the Grand Diviner Yun Luo of the Council of Elders were stationed. Another was on their diagonal side, where a father and daughter, both surrounded by blue light, stood. And the last spot held only a single person, a youth dressed in a green robe, lying lazily on a cloud, watching the battle below. He yawned, then casually flipped his hand, seemingly pulling a peach out of thin air, biting into it. At the final location, a massive lizard beast was circling in the air. Its body was pitch black, and its appearance was extremely fierce. Floating midair, an old man sat cross-legged on its back, dressed in animal skins. The old man's face was covered in pockmarks, and his earlobes bore large, dark earrings the size of fists. Even his lips had 4 red needles piercing through them, as though sealed shut. In that instant, everyone in the area, where no one dared approach, changed their expressions and simultaneously looked up. Behind the old vermilion bird, a figure emerged, Wang Lin. The moment Wang Lin appeared, several pairs of eyes immediately focused on him. The first gaze came from Si Mozhe, his eyes cold with a murderous intent. The second gaze was much gentler, filled with a trace of confusion and nostalgia, belonging to the woman in the father-daughter pair, surrounded by blue light. The third gaze came from the handsome young man eating peaches, his eyes flashing with brilliance, a half-smile appearing on his face. Wang Lin's expression remained calm. His eyes swept over and landed on the father-daughter pair enveloped in blue light. A complicated look flashed in his eyes, but quickly disappeared. Junior greets Senior Blue Dream, Tao Venerable. Wang Lin cupped his hands and respectfully said. A smile appeared on Blue Dream Tao Venerable's face as she nodded and softly said, I had underestimated you before. The meeting between Wang Lin and Blue Dream Tao Venerable surprised the old vermilion bird. His expression turned odd as he glanced at Li Qianmei, standing beside Blue Dream Tao Venerable, then gave a sinister laugh. He didn't dwell on the matter, but his eyes widened and he glared at Si Mozhe. You little brat, what are you looking at? Are you dissatisfied with me? Do you want to challenge me? Come. If you want to fight, I'll entertain you. The old vermilion bird roared, glaring at Si Mozhe, raising his right hand and beckoning. Si Mozhe's expression immediately changed. He knew that this old man was the first young emperor of the land of falling stars, renowned and considered the top person under the great emperor's command. In the Council of Elders, research into this old fellow had been ongoing, and he was not someone easily provoked. Senior, your cultivation reaches the heavens. I am not your opponent. Si Mozhe quickly cupped his hands and spoke in a low voice, the killing intent in his eyes having long since vanished. Humph, you dare not face me, but you go and provoke my junior, spewing such wild words. You need to be taught a lesson. The old vermilion bird looked at Si Mozhe with disdain. With a cold snort, he raised his right hand and swung it forward. With this swing, there was no visible divine transformation, but the Grand Diviner Yun Luo's expression changed drastically. Without hesitation, she quickly retreated several steps. Si Mozhe's pupils constricted sharply, and with a low growl, he made a hand seal. However, as soon as his seal was completed, a thunderous roar suddenly erupted. Boom! The sound of the explosion shook the surroundings. Si Mozhe staggered back, his hands trembling slightly. His face turned pale, and an ethereal flame suddenly ignited around his body. Retreating 3 paces, the flames flickered 3 times. Each time they flared, the burning power inside Si Mozhe's body increased exponentially. After 3 paces, Si Mozhe's body trembled violently. He spat a mouthful of blood, his eyes filled with horror. Senior, using your great power against me, in front of so many Tao friends, what is your meaning? Si Mozhe's face flushed with anger, but as the fury surged, the ethereal flames around his body flared up, absorbing his anger and turning into even fiercer destruction. Once more, Si Mozhe spat blood. At this moment, Grand Diviner Yun Luo rushed forward, raising her jade hand to press against Si Mozhe's back. She was clearly using some secret art, which eased Si Mozhe's pale face slightly, though it remained deathly white. Using great power against the weak? Damn it, You know about using great power against the weak. You forced my boy to fight with just 3 steps of cultivation and dare to say something like that? Fine. I'll use great power against the weak. What of it? The old vermilion bird's temper flared again. Although he appeared amiable toward Wang Lin and seemed to have a good-natured disposition, in reality, when he made a name for himself, he was known for his explosive temper. Hearing Si Mozhe's words, he glared once more, and in a flash, he stepped forward. So fast was his movement that neither the naked eye nor divine sense could track it. In an instant, the old vermilion bird stood in front of Si Mozhe, his right hand raised to strike. With a resounding slap, Si Mozhe let out a grunt, his body stumbling back several steps. His left cheek swelled immediately, turning purple and black. Behind him, Grand Diviner Yunluo's face turned ashen, and she too took several steps back. In a low voice, she said, "Senior, please stop. Our council of elders." "You little girl, shut up. If you say another word, I'll slap you too. Today, I'm going to play the part of the strong bullying the weak." Before Grand Diviner Yunluo could finish speaking, the old vermilion bird shot her a murderous glare. Her words died in her throat, and she clenched her lower lip, silent. Si Mozhe staggered backward a few paces, his vision blurring. "Who the hell do you think you are, insulting my child as a little bastard? You're the bastard, damn it, your whole family is a bunch of bastards," Old Vermilion Bird said, stepping forward again. This time, he raised his left hand and swung it once more, slapping with a loud crack. Si Mozhe groaned, spitting blood as he staggered backward, his fury reaching a boiling point. However, the moment his anger flared, it immediately transformed into flames that scorched his body, causing him to scream in agony as he desperately tried to suppress it. "If my child is a bastard, then isn't that making me one too, old man? Damn it, how dare you insult me?" Old Vermilion Bird glared, stepping forward to chase after him. I didn't." Si Mozhe's heart shook violently. He was about to explain, but his words were no match for Old Vermilion Bird's speed. Suddenly, Old Vermilion Bird was upon him, raising his right hand and slapping again. With a loud crack, Si Mozhe's already purple-black left cheek became even more swollen, and blood splattered from his mouth, some teeth flying out. His body was hurled like a line, thrown far away from Old Vermilion Bird. "Humph, daring to insult me." A murderous gleam flashed in Old Vermilion Bird's eyes. If it weren't for his intention to let Wang Lin establish his prestige, this wouldn't have just been 3 slaps. It would have been a matter of taking his life. Old Vermilion Bird even dared to fish for dragons, and his cultivation was incredibly terrifying. Though Si Mozhe had reached the 3rd step, it was only newly attained. If it were someone else, even with Old Vermilion Bird's strength, there might be hesitation. After all, Si Mozhe had the support of the Elder Council. But Old Vermilion Bird didn't consider these things at all. His thinking was simple: provoke the Vermilion Bird clan, and that's unacceptable. Even if the opponent's cultivation was higher than his, Old Vermilion Bird didn't care. There would naturally be an ancestor stepping in. The Vermilion Bird clan had always upheld this tradition of protecting their own, ingrained in their very bones. Wang Lin watched this scene with a smile, unknowingly finding reflections of both Clearwater and the 5th-generation Vermilion Bird Holy Emperor and Old Vermilion Bird. Wang Lin's personality was simple at times. Those who treated him well, he would repay them tenfold, like Situ Nan, like Clearwater, like the Vermilion Bird Holy Emperor, like Dun Tian, who had stood before him. The monks fighting for the position of Elder of the Falling Life Society on the battlefield had already ceased, retreating to the periphery. The tens of thousands of monks from the land of falling stars were all looking extremely respectful. Among them, there were over 10 imperial envoys, all gazing respectfully toward the sky. As for the others in the sky, none of them spoke out to stop it. After a few slaps, Old Vermilion Bird withdrew his gaze and walked over to Wang Lin's side, not even sparing a glance at the disheveled Si Mozhe and the somber Grand Diviner Yunluo. "I am pleased to see all of you here on Emperor Star today," Old Vermilion Bird said, raising his fist to the crowd. "Although some of the old-timers haven't arrived, it doesn't matter. Today, you are all here to bear witness to the trial of the 3rd young emperor of the land of falling stars. If he succeeds in the trial, from this moment on, he will be the true young emperor. To oppose him is to oppose me, to oppose the land of falling stars," Old Vermilion Bird announced, turning to Wang Lin and pointing at the graceful youth. "This little fellow, you already know Blue Dream Dao Sovereign, so no need for introductions. As for the young man eating peaches, though he looks young, he's actually an old monster. Perhaps you've heard of him. One of the 5 ancient sovereigns, mystic Tone Dao Venerable. Wang Lin maintained his calm demeanor, but his heart stirred. He had indeed heard of mystic Tone Dao Venerable before. Now, seeing him, he found no trace of cultivation on him, and simply cupped his hands in greeting. The beautiful young man chuckled and nodded at Wang Lin. Now, this old man with a sharp tongue, you should know him too. He's not one of the 5 ancient sovereigns, but his cultivation is by no means weaker. He calls himself Primordial Wilderness Sage and specializes in poison attacks, with a fierce reputation. Old Vermilion Bird pointed to the elderly man sitting cross-legged on a lizard beast, wearing animal skins. The old man's eyes flickered, and with a cold snort, he didn't move his lips, but his voice emerged from within. Old Bird, I'm not here today to be a witness, but to fight you once more. However, this youngster isn't bad, so I'll give him something for self-defense. The elder raised his right hand and flicked his finger, causing a segment of his index fingernail to break off and shoot straight toward Wang Lin. A flash of black light, and the half-fingernail hovered before Wang Lin. Old Vermilion Bird's eyes widened when he heard the term Old Bird, but upon seeing the half-fingernail, his face broke into a grin, laughing heartily. This little poison bug is generous. Take it. This item contains the poison attacks of that little bug. It's a sharp weapon to harm enemies. Old Vermilion Bird said, suddenly raising his right hand and pressing down on the 1,000-mile battlefield below. His voice boomed like thunder, shaking the ground. The elder selection of the Falling Life Society is postponed. The young emperor's trial begins now. His voice roared, and the ground of the 1,000-mile battlefield trembled with loud bangs. A terrifying roar of a dragon turtle echoed through the sky, and the giant turtle from earlier, which had appeared under Wang Lin's divine power, suddenly manifested as its turtle shells appeared one by one. The giant turtle was 1,000 miles long, enormous in size, with an appearance so ferocious that a single glance would etch it into one's memory for life. The moment it appeared, a shockwave spread in all directions, causing the tens of thousands of cultivators surrounding it to react with fervent respect, hastily stepping back to avoid being caught in its wake. The giant turtle let out a roar and, after manifesting, suddenly lifted its head, glaring at the old Vermilion Bird. It was as though the very words it spoke held the weight of heaven's law. Amid the rumbling, 3 colossal, unlit incense sticks, each hundreds of feet thick and several thousand feet long, suddenly appeared atop the turtle's back. These incense sticks were a deep gray, pointing toward the sky. From afar, the giant turtle, spanning 1,000 miles, seemed to transform into an altar, with the 3 incense sticks rising like celestial pillars, each one a thunderous spectacle. The young emperor trial of the land of falling stars is quite simple. The 3 incense sticks represent the illusory realms of heaven, earth, and man. You must immerse your soul into each and light the incense. The procedure is not difficult, but 2 things make it challenging, the old Vermilion Bird said gravely, his gaze fixed on Wang Lin. First, lighting the incense is no easy feat. Second, once these gray incense sticks are lit, though they stretch thousands of feet, they will burn to ash in the blink of an eye. What you must do is make every effort to slow the burning. You must exit before the incense is consumed, returning to your physical body. The old Vermilion Bird's expression was serious as he looked at Wang Lin. Every trial carries danger. This trial is no different. If you fail to light the incense, that's one thing. But if you manage to light it and fail to escape before it burns out, your soul will be trapped within and incinerated. While you won't truly die with me here, it would still disappoint me greatly. This trial has only had 2 successes in history. I was the first, and before you, there was another. This person was a prodigy. The first incense lasted 5 breaths, the second lasted 9, and the third was even slower, lasting 14 breaths. Even I, as the first, am not as talented as him. Do you dare to take the trial? Answer me. The old Vermilion Bird's eyes gleamed like burning coals as he stared at Wang Lin. What's there to fear? Wang Lin replied calmly, his voice steady. Good. I look forward to your third surprise. The old Vermilion Bird laughed heartily, raising his right hand. A violent gust of wind lifted Wang Lin's body, and in an instant, Wang Lin transformed into a streak of lightning, heading straight for the first incense stick on the giant turtle's back. Si Mozhe's eyes flickered with deep malice, a hidden venom seeping into his gaze as he watched Wang Lin. His face was purple, the result of the old Vermilion Bird's injury, a deliberate humiliation. Though he dared not act as openly as before, his murderous intent toward Wang Lin had only grown stronger. The Elder Council of the Land of Falling Stars has conducted extensive research into this trial. This brat's cultivation is certainly not enough to succeed. Si Mozhe sneered inwardly. Beside him, Grand Diviner Yunluo's face darkened. With a casual motion, her right hand performed a seal within her sleeve, as if calculating something. Yet, her gaze briefly shifted toward Mystic Tone Dao Venerable in the distance. Meanwhile, Mystic Tone Dao Venerable lay upon a cloud, her eyes narrowing slightly as a strange gleam passed through them. This boy must be Wang Lin, the one Waterpath Master mentioned. Is the Boundary Sealing Sovereign still alive? Waterpath Master wouldn't dare deceive me, but this situation requires caution. The reason I intervened back then was because Palm Sovereign offered great rewards. Now, if I am to act, it will depend on whether the Elder Council is willing to part with their prize. Blue Dream Dao Venerable's expression remained calm as he watched Wang Lin charge toward the incense sticks. He couldn't help but inwardly sigh. This child has destroyed the Lightning Thunder clan in such a short time, and now has such deep ties to the land of falling stars. I truly underestimated him. As one of the 5 ancient sovereigns, I have a duty to protect the ancient star of antiquity, but this boy's connection to Xun'er, Blue Dream Dao Venerable glanced at his daughter, his eyes betraying a complex mix of emotions. I can afford to ignore the Elder Council. Even if Palm Sovereign were to leave seclusion, I could refuse. But if Dreamer personally comes, what should I do? His heart twisted with pain as memories of his wife surfaced. He would never forget the image of her, half dead and lost to him, turning into a stranger before his eyes. The elder clad in animal skins shut his eyes, as though indifferent to everything around him. To him, nothing in this world mattered more than the battle with the old vermilion bird. The giant lizard beast beneath him snorted white vapor from its nostrils, its cold eyes also closed in silent repose. Meanwhile, below, tens of thousands of cultivators were all holding their breath, watching as Wang Lin approached the first incense stick, each of them deep in thought. This guy is really lucky to be chosen by the first young emperor, but the trial is extremely difficult. I'm certain he won't succeed. As the first elder of the Falling Life Society, even I, with my cultivation at the 5th decay of heaven and man, dared not attempt this trial to obtain the title of young emperor. This brat may have caught the attention of the great emperor and first young emperor, but succeeding? A pipe dream. On the grand arena of the Emperor Star, where the gaze of tens of thousands of cultivators was focused, Wang Lin approached the massive incense burner, landing on the dragon turtle shell beside it. Standing here up close, his figure seemed almost insignificant in comparison. The giant incense burner, like a mountain, faintly exuded a fragrance that reached the nose, refreshing the mind. Wang Lin took a deep breath, raised his right hand, and placed it on the incense. As soon as his palm made contact, his eyes closed, and his body became still, his soul following the scent. The first trial, the human realm illusion of heaven, earth, and man. The sound of flowing water reached his ears, gradually overshadowed by the bustling noise from the blurry surroundings, growing louder until it completely drowned out the water's sounds, replacing everything Wang Lin had heard. The sky was blue and beautiful, like silk spread out, with clouds adorning it. However, it seemed somewhat unreal. Wang Lin stood on a bridge, with the river flowing beneath it. In the distance, a few boats floated, and the faint sound of music reached his ears. On both sides of the bridge were bustling streets, full of people whose faces were blurred and unclear. Taking his gaze away from the sky, Wang Lin felt as if he had entered a dream. Everything felt illusory, leaving him with no sense of reality. Even the bridge seemed faint, as if it could dissolve at any moment. It was as if everything in this world, except for himself, was a hazy illusion. This was a mortal city, not large, yet home to many people. There were numerous shops and street vendors, their calls echoing constantly. However, everything was blurred, out of place with him. Is this the first trial? Wang Lin murmured, his gaze thoughtful. He was about to step off the bridge when suddenly, his body jolted, and he turned sharply to look at the river. A large boat was slowly approaching, with a young man seated on it. In his hand was a wine cup, and several dancing courtesans performed in front of him, while a few attendants stood behind. The heavens and earth are but the end of all things. Time is the passing guest of 100 generations. And fleeting life is but a dream. How much joy can it bring? How much joy does it bring? The voice, though faint, rang out with wild abandon. The young man drank from his wine cup in one go. Since arriving here, everything Wang Lin had seen was blurry, but at that moment, As his gaze landed on the young man, his appearance immediately became crystal clear. The clarity of his figure was in stark contrast to the surrounding blur. In that instant, Wang Lin froze, his mind ringing as if the heavens were collapsing and the earth cracking. The young man's appearance was familiar, extremely familiar, almost identical to the young man, with his wild words and carefree drinking, was none other than Wang Lin himself. The only difference was the passage of time. Although Wang Lin appeared to be a young man, in reality, he was nearly 2,000 years old, and the scent of time naturally emanated from him. But the young man drinking wine radiated vitality and life. No matter how one looked at him, he appeared to be a mere mortal in his 30s. Wang Lin stood there, frozen, watching as the boat drew closer, watching as the young man put down his wine cup and wiped the wine stains from the corner of his mouth. Wonderful. Young master, your poem is truly extraordinary. In my humble opinion, such verses could only belong to the heavens, rarely to be heard on earth. Truly marvelous. One of the attendants behind the young man, appearing to be around 40, praised with a smile, shaking his head. Nonsense, this is clearly an ancient poem. The way you say it, it's as if I wrote it myself, the young man replied with a smile, picking up a fan from the table and pointing it at his attendant. The attendant chuckled, not minding at all, then looked around and sighed. Young master, our money is running low. Renting this boat on the Sioux City River is expensive, and it's already been 4 days. We should head to the capital soon. The young man shook his head, and someone beside him refilled his wine. He took a sip, about to speak when suddenly, he froze. His eyes immediately fixed on Wang Lin, standing on the bridge ahead. Wang Lin and the young man locked eyes for a brief moment. The young man trembled slightly, his expression changing. His eyes widened in surprise as he gently set his wine cup down, stood up, and cupped his fist toward Wang Lin from afar. Brother, would you care to join me for a drink? Wang Lin's mental shock gradually subsided as he lifted his gaze. His body took a step forward, floating like a leaf swept by the wind, and lightly landed on the boat. The middle-aged attendant beside the young man's eyes bulged, staring fixedly at Wang Lin. His expression was one of disbelief. What shocked him was not just Wang Lin's actions, but more so his appearance. It was almost identical to that of his young master. Once aboard the ship, Wang Lin didn't speak, directly sitting down opposite the young man. The young man studied Wang Lin carefully, growing increasingly astonished. The resemblance between the two was striking. He hesitated for a moment before sitting down as well, instructing his attendant to prepare more wine vessels. Soon after, the attendant placed a clean wine cup on the table and filled it up. While pouring, his gaze lingered on Wang Lin, quietly astonished within. Brother, your appearance is quite similar to mine. I've traveled to many places and met countless people, but never have I encountered anyone who resembles me so much. May I ask, what is your name? The young man asked with a smile, curiosity evident in his voice. Wang Lin didn't respond. There was a deep, contemplative look in his eyes as he picked up the cup and drank it all in one go. Seeing Wang Lin's silence, the young man didn't mind. He personally took the wine jug and refilled Wang Lin's cup. The gentle sound of flowing water beside the boat filled the air, and gradually, the ship passed through a stone bridge, drifting slowly towards the distance. The singing and dancing at the bow continued, though the only ones watching were silent. Wang Lin drank cup after cup of wine, his thoughts and musings turning into a whirlwind that unsettled his mind, making the wine taste bland and unappealing. What's going on here? The trial on the human side. Why would there be someone like this? This person not only looks like me, but even his soul. Wang Lin furrowed his brows and took another sip of wine. The young man continued to smile, not saying a word, but the attendant by his side sneered inwardly and whispered to himself. This is osmanthus wine from Sioux City, quite expensive. Gradually, nightfall approached, and a cold breeze blew across the river, sweeping lightly over the boat. The song and dance girls at the bow had long since retired, leaving only Wang Lin, the young man, and the attendant. The moonlight slowly spread across the earth, reflecting off the river. As the breeze passed, the water shimmered beautifully. The attendant, now growing impatient, occasionally glanced up at the sky. Eventually, unable to bear it any longer, He bent over and tugged at the young man's sleeve, giving him a pointed look. The young man shook his head and smiled, ignoring him. The attendant gave a bitter laugh and whispered, "Young master, if we continue to drift like this, we'll have to pay more for the boat fee. And this wine is almost gone." "Drink mine," Wang Lin said, his contemplative look slowly fading. With a flip of his right hand, he produced a wine jug. This jug wasn't filled with dragon blood, but it wasn't ordinary wine either. For mortals, it could extend life and greatly enhance intelligence. Seeing Wang Lin conjure a wine jug out of nowhere, the attendant's eyes nearly popped out in shock, but he didn't dare urge his young master any further. Pouring a cup for himself, Wang Lin placed the jug on the table. After taking a sip, he looked up at the sky and suddenly spoke. "This is Zhao Kingdom, isn't it?" The young man, equally stunned by Wang Lin's display of the wine jug, took a deep breath after a long pause and nodded. "Senior, are you an immortal? You grew up in a mountain village. Your father, Wang Tianxue, is the second son in the family and a carpenter. Your mother, Zhou Su, is from Zhou family village, and she studied at a private school for a few years. Your mother taught you how to read when you were young." Wang Lin muttered softly to himself as he held the wine cup. These words were like a thunderclap in the young man's ears. He stood frozen, stunned in place. Sighing deeply, Wang Lin put down his cup, casting a complex look at the young man. He whispered, "The life you've chosen, just walk it through." With that, Wang Lin stood up, gazing at the bright moon in the sky. Everything before him blurred for a moment, and in an instant, it all cleared, as though everything had vanished and then returned to clarity. He took a step towards the river, his body heading straight for the sky as if walking on air, gradually fading away into the distance. On the boat, the attendant trembled and slumped down beside the young man. His eyes were filled with horror as he gazed at Wang Lin's departing figure, stammering, Truly an immortal. Young master, your dream was real." The young man stared blankly at the sky for a long time. After a deep exhale, he looked down at the wine jug on the table, his eyes filled with confusion. Wang Lin, high in the sky, gazed down at the earth below. The land before him seemed familiar. It was unmistakably the same as Zhao Kingdom and Vermilion Bird Star. This human trial, I entered with my soul, thinking the test would be similar to the Tao-seeking trial on Destiny Star. But I didn't expect. This place isn't about seeking the Tao, but about the inner demon. Wang Lin sighed inwardly, his eyes filled with complexity. Am I tired of cultivation? Otherwise, why would an illusion of a different life appear in my soul? Wang Lin fell silent. Compared to the seeking of the Tao on Destiny Star back then, this time I am fully aware of my existence. I know all of this is illusory. I know my soul is what has entered here, and more importantly, I know why I've come. I've come to light the human incense. Wang Lin lifted his head, a trace of unspeakable melancholy in his eyes. In that fleeting instant when he saw through the haziness of this entire world, he already understood. This was the first trial, the place of the human incense, and how to light it. If he wished, he could ignite the first incense stick right now. It's just that, before I light it, I want to see them again, and her. Wang Lin's eyes revealed a flicker of solitude and a sorrow he could not dispel. He knew this was all fake, conjured by his soul, the illusion of the human realm, but he couldn't help treating it as real. He wanted to see them once more. She had become the one untouchable scale in his heart, his reverse scale. Just one look, then I'll light the incense. Wang Lin took a step forward and vanished without a trace. On the Emperor Star, tens of thousands of gazes were locked on the back of the illusory giant turtle. Beneath the first stick of incense stood a figure, unmoving, hand resting upon it. A gentle breeze stirred, lifting the figure's long hair and robes, making them flutter in the wind. In the eyes of the old vermilion bird, a trace of urgency appeared, growing deeper as he stared at that unmoving silhouette. Why is he taking so long? With this child's cultivation, lighting the first stick should have been completed long ago. I estimated 2 moments at most. Light it, then withdraw when the incense burns out. But it's nearly been a full hour. An hour in here equals most of a day inside. Don't tell me this child, after thousands of years of cultivation, still cannot let go, and his soul has truly returned to his homeland? Si Mozhe's lips curled into a subtle, cold smile as he stared at the figure below the incense, inwardly scoffing. It's only the first incense, and he's already faltering. This little bastard will never pass the trial. And if he fails here, in front of all these cultivators, even the first young emperor will lose all face. Grand Diviner Yunluo furrowed her brows tightly. Her right hand, hidden within her sleeve, formed seals even faster. Her calculations were clearly reaching a critical moment. Just then, the old vermilion bird's eyes suddenly narrowed as he stared at the figure under the incense. Not only him, but most of the cultivators present also clearly saw that the white-clothed figure, hand resting on the first incense, eyes closed, had tears flowing down from both eyes. 2 crystalline streaks, slowly trickling down. Soul returning home. When the soul grieves and returns to the flesh, the tears flow. What a first trial of the human incense, Blue Dream Tao Sovereign murmured softly, his gaze resting on those tear stains. Inside the illusory realm of the human incense, Wang Lin stood at the foot of Mount Hengyue. He looked toward a mountain village in the distance, then turned to leave. A glimmer of tears slid from his eyes. In the flame-scorched nation, within Luo River sect, in the pill chamber behind the mountain, a young girl in her blooming years furrowed her brows as she stared pitifully at a smoking pill furnace, beside which stood a middle-aged woman also frowning. In a soft voice, the girl said, "Master, Wana failed again." All right, you always put on that same pitiful face. Go to the back medicine peak and pick some moonwater herb for me. I'll see if I can salvage this batch of pills. The middle-aged woman shot the girl a stern glance. The girl cutely stuck out her tongue, her face lighting up with a smile as she quickly ran out of the chamber.